So guess what we're working on today? Yep, it's time to do some work. The weather's still been very nice for us. When it's nice, it makes me want to be in the shop, and when I want to be in the shop, I want to get stuff done. And since, we're coming to the end of January, March is a couple months away. Typically in our area, we really don't get spring until April, May. But I'm being optimistic and hoping that maybe we get a little bit nicer weather a little bit sooner than later. And because of that, my goal is to have this car running for March. And to do that, I need to work on it. And what I found getting this car running earlier in the fall, it seemed to have a really bad vacuum leak. Now, I don't know if that's valve adjustment issue or another issue elsewhere or whatever. But one of the things that I want to do is I want to pull the intake manifold off and check the intake manifold gaskets before I dive too far into it. By doing that, it also allows me to see what type of lifters are in this thing and see if it's solid or if it's hydraulic. I'm going to assume that they're hydraulic, but I just don't know. I don't know if you can really tell, but these the intake manifold looks like it was sealed with the old gaskets on the end, not with RTV. Those are known to leak. So I want to do a once over on this. So what we're going to do today is we're going to pull the intake manifold off. But to do that, we got to do some coolant draining so that we can pull off the upper radiator hose. We got to take off the alternator bracket, pull a fuel line, and then do some bolts, alternator, and it should all come off. I'm hoping that the valve covers don't have to come off, but maybe we'll see. They sometimes can interfere with the intake manifold coming up and out, but we'll see with that. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put you on the tripod and we're just going to work away on this. Maybe we'll make a full time lapse out of it. There isn't really a whole lot to say about this. It's a fairly quick and a fairly simple job. It's just a lot of small tedious things. So I'll get you on the tripod in a second here and we'll get going from there. All right, let's get this show on the road. Got some coolant out so I can start pulling the coolant hose. Let's see how much of a mess this makes. All right, so the intake manifold is off. Again, it's nothing too difficult. It's fairly straightforward. Make sure you got a catch pan because you want to catch all the coolant that will come out. And now I can basically start looking at this and seeing kind of what's going on with it. Got some coolant down in the galley there, so I'll probably want to do an oil change. But I gotta say, without knowing who owned this engine or anything like that, this thing is like, it's spotless. Like, you would think that this engine was rebuilt less than like 100 kilometers ago and was barely ran. So man, I don't know what's going on with this motor, but it's sure nice. So here you can see there's these gaskets. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put a piece of cardboard or something down in the galley there. Okay, so just put this paper towel down in here, catch some of the debris. So now you can see, this is one of those rubber gaskets I was telling you about. And they come pretty much with every kit that you can, most kits that you buy. This side's got one. And I mean, they siliconed it to the, see, so there's another one of those. Personally, they work, but they don't work that great. And I usually just get rid of them because I find that you're better off just to use a good 1/4 inch bead of silicone. All right, so now I can take a look and I can see. All right, so I did some looking, I did some research. Turns out they're just your standard hydraulic roller lifters, which is fine. The only reason I really wanted to know that for was so that when I do the valve lash on this thing, that I know what I'm setting the valve lash for. There's different procedures, whether they are solid or hydraulic. So now that I know, now I can go ahead and I can set the valve lash in accordance to what I know based off of this. I'll take a look at the intake manifold gaskets. They don't look too bad. They look a little worn, but nothing crazy. Like there's dirt buildup around the ports and stuff like that. But they look like they're in fairly good shape, and I mean, there should be no reason why I can't reuse those. I'll take the silicone off both ends of those. Once I get the silicone off, then I will reseal the intake manifold back to the intake with silicone. Not using, reseal it back with silicone. I'll probably use Permatex Ultra Gray for that. And then that way that will be sealed good and I won't have to worry about that. And that should solve any leak issues. The other issue that I found on this, and it's not a big deal breaker, but you know, you can see these back 2 passages and as well as these front 2, they have coolant in it, and I don't know if the light will show. No, it's not showing. Sometimes these bolts, depending, can be through, and there was no thread sealant on that, so I'm not going to worry about that. But yeah, so just going to do some cleanup because there's a lot of debris down in there, like there and in there. When I bought this car, it sat outside for a very long time without a hood on it, so a lot of that debris got built up in there, so I want to get rid of that. Get the surfaces cleaned up, get the end walls here and here all cleaned up. I'll get the silicone laid on there, and then from there basically put the intake manifold back on and button it all back up. And then from there it'll be pretty much done for the intake side of things, and I won't have to worry about nothing there. And then it'll be on to doing a valve adjustment to make sure they're good. And once that's done, got 2 more things before this thing can solidly run. One is alternator, one has to do with the radiator. But for now, I'm going to get the vacuum out. I'm going to vacuum up all the crap in the galley and all around everything in there. And then once I have that done, I'll reseal the intake manifold. So today I wanted it to be a day of getting the intake manifold, that guy down there, reinstalled. Unfortunately, I put an order in for some intake manifold gaskets. Rock Auto. I know it's not your fault, but FedEx got delayed, so unfortunately that's delaying me, as I was hoping to have that in on Friday, which didn't happen. So basically today, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to be doing a valve adjustment and a couple of other small things. I've got all the rockers all loose again. I don't know if the method that I'm going to use is the best or the preferred method, but you know, the internet says there's like 8 different ways of doing valve adjustment on this one. Basically, for me, I'm going to use the exhaust open, intake closed method. And basically that consists of turning over the crank pulley, and then when you see your exhaust valve close, you then adjust the intake, and then you continue turning it around, and then when the intake is closing, then you adjust your exhaust and you basically run through that. I did a bunch of reading on this, and there seems to be a half a dozen different ways that people do it. Some people just turn the pulley around and around and around and around and around and tighten them all, and just tighten them all over and over and over. Some people set it at top dead center for number one and do certain valves and certain exhaust and intake valves, and then turn it over to 6 top dead center and do the same thing. Who knows what the right way is? The consensus seems to be that if you have a cam in the vehicle that you don't know what the specs are on it, that the EOIC method is the best. Can't say, but that's what I'm going to do. It does seem to be a little bit more time consuming because of how the work that's involved per cylinder, but I mean, I got plenty of time to kill, so let's kill some time. Another thing I'm going to do, you can see down here another hack job. They basically used a lug nut, no word of a lie, to secure the header to this. So I'm going to be pulling this bracket off. I'm going to be cutting this tab out, and because there's really no need for it, it connects to the head up here. So you got a spot here, and then it connects down here. So it's got 2 spots already. So I don't see a need for that. So I'm going to cut that off, get rid of this, and then that way I can put a proper bolt into that side and get that properly done. And then once I have the valves done, then I'll just have to wait until I get my manifold gaskets to reinstall the intake manifold. What I'll probably do is just set you guys up on a tripod. I know there's lots of information on the different methods of doing valves, but because I sort of struggled with trying to figure out what exactly they meant by exhaust open, intake close, I understand now. I have a good idea on it. I'll just do a quick little show for you guys so you can understand what that means for anyone who might be new to doing small block valves. It can apparently work on various different models with the same sort of idea, Fords and stuff, but I'm working on a small block Chevy, so that's what we'll do it with. So I'm going to do pull the bracket off of the power steering pump and work on that first. And then once I have that done and get that off, then I'll show you guys what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to pull this bolt off so then that I can get all this stuff out, and then I'm going to take this and get that removed. So there's that bracket, there's the lug nut, there's the bolt, and looks like, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 washers on there. So one of the reasons you don't want that for is because if you have that on there, you're not going to get a good seal for your exhaust manifold or your headers or whatever you're running down there. And then what'll basically happen is that's going to leak and it won't be tight, so we need to get rid of that. So I'll probably end up having to find another bolt for that, which looks like I got one right there. So there's the bolt for replacement. Not sure what the size on that one is. Let's find out. Let's see if it's 5/8. Socket does not fit. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'll find a wrench to put that on, and then I'm going to take this, zip this off, and then I can get that all bolted back to the car and get the power steering pump bracket and everything like that better. Once I have that all completed, I'll bring you guys back. All right, so there's the bracket with that piece cut off, and got a bolt. Ooh. Yo, that bolt is still hot. All right, got a bolt. I lost the one for it. Basically, this just bolts to here. And that swings down to there. And then you just put a bolt to the back. Tighten this down. Now this bracket is only temporary. I do plan on getting a nice cleaner one, but for now, this will just have to do. Okay, so that's tight. That would allow me to now move that, which is good. That's not going nowhere, and that's nice and tight. Good. So now, what we're going to do, we're going to do the valves on number 1, and I can show you what's going on with that. So number 1 valves are in view, and basically, doing this method, crank over your pulley, and if you watch, this one here is your exhaust, and this one here is your intake. And a trick that I learned that I wasn't aware of before is that you can tell which one of these is an intake and exhaust just by looking at it. So this one is pointing down, so this is the exhaust, that's an exhaust valve. Same with this one, because this one's pointing to the exhaust, it's an exhaust valve. And if you're to look on this side, these two come to the inside, which means they're intake. So what we do is we just turn this around, and then what you'll see is this one start to lift up. You can see it's starting to move up, which means right now this valve is closed. And as I move it up, you can see it's coming up, 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 and now it's stopped, which means this valve, because this is being pushed up, is now open. So what that means is that EO, exhaust open, you would adjust this one down till you have the slack is released out of this one. So this is snug, and then you would do your half or quarter or 3/4 turn or whatever you want on that. And then as you go around again, you'll see that this one comes up. And this is the exhaust or the intake closed. So this is coming up. So right now, this one is closed. As you rotate it around, because it's got to go finish this stroke, as it comes back around, you can now watch this one's coming up, which means your intake is opening. And then as you go around a little bit further, tops out. And as you go a little bit more, it starts going down. And as you finish the downstroke on this one, you can see it stop moving. So now that means this exhaust is closed, and now you would do this valve. So basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to finish off doing the valves on this. So I'll finish doing all the valves, all down one side, all down the other side. Once I have all the valves done, then basically what I'm going to do is once I have the gaskets, I'm going to set this guy on there dry just to see, and then I'm going to check, because when you put your intake manifold on there, there's going to be a gap from the bottom of this to the bottom of, or the top of this, to the top of your wall here. Make sure you know it's within spec or within a reasonable amount, because you are going to have to put RTV on there, and if it's too wide, the RTV is not going to work. So I'll get the manifolds in, and then we can get that going. But for now, power steering pump is secured, working better. Exhaust, the header manifold is sealed. Now it's not great, still has tons of leaks. I'll probably have to replace those gaskets at some point, but whatever, that's not for today. Do the valves and get that installed afterwards. So I'm going to finish off doing the exhaust valve, do the valve adjustment on this thing, and then once I have that done, we'll see. But hopefully in the next day or two, I'll have the gaskets for this and I can finish that off. All right, so about a day later, FedEx came. So you can see here, got the new gasket on top, got the old one on the bottom. Now, I learned something about this one, and I learned something about this one. So this one, you can see is very stiff, doesn't move very much. This one is really flimsy. But the other thing that's different about this one is it's got these raised silicone rubbery edges on it. And basically what this is designed for, and what I found is that this one on the bottom where it's really thick, it has a metal core in it. And this one doesn't have a metal core, but it's got these little raised rubber edges. And basically what that means and what that's for is that it doesn't make much of a difference on the head side, But where it makes the big difference is on the intake side. And the little rubber bumps, it's so that if there's any sort of warpage or distortion in the base of your intake, it basically will fill that in. And I discovered this by looking at part numbers on Felpro, and what I found is that this one here is considered, all right, in typical GoPro fashion, my battery died, so had to plug it in to finish recording here. So this one here is considered a 90314-1. Now that part number doesn't come up anything specifically, but the closest that I could sort of get this matched to is like a 1204 sort of a gasket. This one here is a 1256, and looking on Felpro's website, it's a different brand. It doesn't have the metal core as this one. It has the block off. It has sort of a blocked off plate for the heat passover and the intakes, which you can see on this one right there. It's usually the middle port, usually somewhere in the middle of your intake. But they sort of restricted that one so it doesn't flow nearly as much. And then from there, it's basically, they fit exactly the same. They just lay over your manifold here. You know, you do your seam and your silicone in the corners. And so that's what basically I'm doing tonight. I want to get this intake installed and put back on and get this done, because I got 2 more things that I need to do and I want to finish those off. So intake install isn't super difficult. They're actually pretty simple and pretty easy to do. There's a few key things that you have to take into consideration when you're putting your intake manifold back on. The first, clean surfaces. For the heads, it doesn't make much of a big difference for the heads for this side of the head to be clean. What I do recommend is making sure around the coolant ports are clean, because generally when you put these intake manifold gaskets on, people, and myself included, will generally run just a really light thin bead or really thin coat of silicone around the front and the rear ports. 1, it helps keep the gasket in place. 2, if there is any leaks or any coolant that decides to come up, well, you have something to help you there. And then the other is making sure that the front wall and that back wall are absolutely as spotless as you possibly can. Now, I'm using acetone, but you can use brake clean, paint thinner, or any solvent. And basically, I use paper towel, but you can use a white rag, and all you're doing is basically wiping those surfaces down. And when they're wiped down, you want them to come off clean. And when the cloth or the towel is clean, that's how you know when it's ready to be put on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the surfaces cleaned, I'm going to get the silicone laid down, I'm going to get the gaskets put on, and I'm going to get the intake manifold ready to be installed. I'm not really going to go too far in depth in installing the intake manifold. There's hundreds of videos on that. And then once I have that installed, then it'll basically be getting the distributor installed and getting it back up the top dead center and going from there. So I'm going to move along, get the intake manifold set and installed. And when I have that ready and back on there, I will bring you guys back and show you where I'm at. All right, so the intake manifold is back on. It's all secured. Bolts are all snugged down. I'm not going to be planning on running this for a while, so to give it plenty of time for the RTV to cure where it needs to. You can tell that you've done a good job, because if you can see down inside that hole there, you can see that bead of silicone. That means that there's just the perfect amount in there and not too much that it's going to basically fall inside the block and make a big giant mess. A couple of things on this. I don't know if I made note or mention. These thicker gaskets compared to the ones that I put on there, apparently the thicker ones are designed if you're going to be using like an old cast iron manifold. My thinking is that because the cast iron manifold is a lot heavier, that it's going to hold this down and create a better seal, where the aluminum manifolds on these, like this one here, which is an old Torker single plane, because it's so much lighter, it's not able to press the gasket down. And because it can't press the gasket down, it's going to create leaks. And on that note, one of the other things you want to do is make sure that not only are you cleaning the head surfaces for the gaskets when you're doing that, make sure you clean the bottom of the intake manifold along that wall on the same side, so it's all nice and clean and prepped for RTV as well, because again, cleanliness, RTV, it goes hand in hand, and one works with the other. So basically, I'm going to leave it where it's at now. The intake manifold is back on. Everything is sealed back up. I should have no more issues with that. I did notice on the bottom side of the intake manifold when I was cleaning it that there was a lot of black soot around the crossover ports. So that to me leads to believe that there was a leak or something going on there. So what I'm hoping is that when I get this thing back up and running, the vacuum readings on it are going to be a lot more stable. When I had it running and I had the vacuum gauge on it, it was bouncing back and forth, like, you know, say it should be at 18 degrees at idle, it would be fluctuating or between 17 to 19 at a good time. So there was definitely a vacuum leak in there. So that's basically where I'm going to leave it off now. I got the manifold back installed. That was a big project. I got a little delayed on that because there were shipping delays from FedEx and Rock Auto. I'm not blaming Rock Auto, I'm not blaming FedEx, but there was a delay in there which threw me back, which not a big deal, allowed me to do some other things. So from here, it's probably going to be another video, maybe this in a few days. I don't know, it's been really warm, warmer than normal for us here. I think it's considerably warm in my shop right now. Yeah, it's about 5 degrees-ish. It looks to be about 42 for you guys in the States. So, I mean, it may not seem warm, but for us up here, it's considerably warm. So yeah, just want to say thank you to everyone also who subscribed in the last little while. Numbers have been going up. I appreciate that. It makes me want to keep doing this for you guys and making videos, whether it's on the car or the truck or, you know, whatever it is. You guys watch, you guys subscribe, makes me want to keep doing it. So for now, I'm signing off. I'll get this video uploaded, and I will see you guys in the next one.